So up to this point, we already have the basic harvesting mechanics of our character, being able to swing a axe, hit a tree, recover the wood, and the tree will explode after we are done harvesting it. But what we want to do next is set up a new harvestable object with its own set of resources. And also to differentiate between the harvestable objects, we'll have different tool types. So right now we're using a lumberjack's axe, so it makes sense that we're harvesting a tree. But if we set up a rock harvestable, then it would make much more sense to be using the pickaxe tool in order to harvest it. So we'll need a mechanic in order to check if we're using the pickaxe or the axe, and then only allow those specific tools to harvest the rock or the tree correspondingly. So let's start by setting up the rock harvestable object. This harvestable object in the scene, I'm going to delete that instance. And then let's go over to the assets objects folder, harvestable, where we have the harvestable object inside of here. So what I want to do with this harvestable object is make it the root prefab for any future prefabs we create. So we want one prefab for a harvestable rock and one for a harvestable tree. So we're going to want to set those up. So let's drag one of these harvestable objects onto the scene. I'm going to rename this harvestable object to be harvestable object underscore tree pine. And now let's drag it back into the harvestable folder and then choose a prefab variant. So when you have a prefab variant, it means that this is based on the original prefab of the harvestable object. And we can override settings in the harvestable object, but by default, we're going to inherit the defaults from harvestable object. So it's just that the harvestable object are now the defaults, and then any modifications will be set on the variant. So I'm going to rename this and get rid of the variant part, since the tree pine part already kind of defines that. And now let's drag a new harvestable object onto the scene. And I'm going to rename this one to be, let's say, large rock. And I'll drag it into the harvestable folder under assets, objects, harvestable, prefab variant. Okay, so now these two variants are based on the original, so if we need to make a change that applies to everything, do it on harvestable object, and if you need to edit something specific to the variant, then do it on the variant prefab. So let's rename large rock variant, remove the variant part, and now we can double click into the harvestable object large rock, and then let's rename the child node to be something more like resource node, and I'll also do that on the main harvestable object. So resource node down here, and now that will be the default name whenever we create a instance from that prefab. If we look at tree pine, you'll see that it has already been renamed here as well. So go back into the large rock prefab variant. Let's take the resource node and let's assign a sprite to it. So if we select here, I'm going to search for rock, and we should have a few rocks in the project from the art pack. So let's select a rock we want to use. We can go with this rock large 2. And now let's change the settings for this prefab variant. So first off, with this circle collider, I want to remove it and replace it with a capsule collider. So we can have kind of an oval shape around the bottom of the rock for where we can harvest the rock. So let's remove the circle collider. I will add a component, and that will be the capsule collider 2D. Okay, and I'm going to take the direction and make it horizontal so it can be wider than it is tall. Let's hit edit, move the top down to right around here, and the bottom up here as well. Probably something we want to change here in advance is going to be the sprite sorting pivot of the large rock. So I'm going to click here and then click on the large rock prefab. Let's go into the sprite editor and set a custom pivot. So I'm going to pull this down to where I think would be a good sorting point for the rock. So that will be kind of at the center of the base of the rock, probably right around there. So 0.5 for the X and 0.32, let's say, for the Y. Hit apply, hit X. Okay, now if we look at this prefab, and let's hit save if it pops up there for unsaved changes. Go to the resource node, and you'll notice that the pivot moved up a bit, so we're going to need to adjust the capsule collider as well. So let's change the offset on the capsule collider and move that up. Maybe it just needs to be 0 there. No, a little bit more than that. Let's go with 0.02, 0.1. Oh, 0 actually works pretty good. Okay, the offset for the X, I'll change that to 0. And now I'm going to do edit collider. Let's bring in the sides a bit for this capsule collider to something like that. It's not perfect. If you want to be super precise, you could use a polygon collider, but this should be okay for this shape of the rock. So we'll go with that for now, and you can always change it later if you need to. So now let's hit play and kind of test what we've got. We've got this rock over here. We can go up to it, have the normal axe, hit the rock on the side, and it's going to generate those wood particles. Just to test, we can come over here to this side as well and get the same effect. And the rock can harvest 5 resources. So next, of course, we need to change the type of resource that it's harvesting. So to do that, go into Assets Resources, where we have the resource wood brown prefab for the game object and the scriptable object resources wood brown. And let's duplicate both of these, Control C, Control V, but we're going to change the sprite that is in here for both of them. So I'll copy both of them, and then let's rename it to be resource rock, and then down here resource rock as well. Okay, so let's select the sprite, and we're going to be looking for a rock sprite, so that's going to be rock item here. Now go to resources rock and do the same thing. So let's change the name here to rock. The icon will be rock item. The description will be let's say basic stone resource for buildings, and the value can just be 1 as well. Okay, so if we look at the rock item PNG, you'll see that it is 8 by 6. So what we're going to want to do is take the particles that are being emitted and make them smaller as well to match the size of this rock item. So let's start by creating a new material under resources materials. So we have material wood brown here. I'm going to Control C, Control V to duplicate that, and I'll rename this to be material rock. Let's change the albedo map to rock item. Okay, so you can search for that in the project, drop it into the albedo map, and that's probably all we need here. So now click on the harvestable object large rock from the prefab variant and the hierarchy. Let's go down here to renderer on the particle system, and let's select the new material. So in the project window, under resources materials, we have material rock. So let's put that in here. We can hit play to test. Okay, and then I think for the size as well, we want to shrink that to 0.08. So we'll see how that goes with the size of the rock. Let's scroll down to the bottom as well. So we have the game object emitter. We want to change the game object that we are replacing the particles with. So now in the resources, assets resources, that is, take resources rock and put it in the object prefab. So now it's going to be replacing the particles with the rock item. So let's hit play. Let's go over here, hit the rock, and we can see them being emitted from the rock shape, and then we can collect them. Now I think the last thing we need to change on resources rock is we need to change the resource pickup from resource wood brown to resources rock, and then that will add the correct scriptable object item to the player's inventory. Let's hit play now. Exit out into the hierarchy, click on the gatherer, and let's scroll down to see the inventory. So we have our resources dictionary down here. Let's collect some rocks. I'm going to hit this a few times, and we get the rocks added to the inventory. Notice it's resource rock. Well, let's collect a tree over here with the different prefab, and that gives us a new dictionary entry. So our inventory now has 2 types of resources. Okay, so now we successfully have 2 types of resource nodes that we can duplicate in our game. So anywhere you want there to be a rock resource, you can just duplicate it. So let's just duplicate some of these trees, and then those will all be harvestable for the player. So if you add a bunch of these harvestable objects to the scene, you might notice the hierarchy gets kind of cluttered. So I'm going to right click, and I'm going to create an empty game object. I'll call this harvestable nodes. And let's take all of these harvestable objects and then let's put them under harvestable nodes. So just keeping things organized, you can click on harvestable nodes and see all of the child game objects with their colliders here. And we can collapse the menu to keep our scene a little bit more organized. Okay, so lastly, we need to have those tool types set up so that we can only harvest a rock with a pickaxe, and we can only harvest the tree with using a lumberjack's axe. So let's create a scriptable object for tool types and then use that across our project for checking if the tool type is correct. So in the scripts folder, I'm going to right click, create a new script, C# script, and I'll call this tool type. Open it up. First thing we're going to do is change it to type scriptable object. remove the start and update methods, and let's create a menu item so that we can create the different types of tools in our assets of the project. So create asset menu, and then as a property, set file name, and we're going to set that to tool type. For menu name, we're going to set that to gatherer top-down RPG / tool type. Okay, so now we'll be able to right click in the Unity window and to create our assets for the project. So the tool type, we can add some fields to it to define more about what this tool type is. So let's do a field serialized field, and I'll do public string display name with a get private set. So how we want it to be represented in the game by a string. And then we can have a icon field and property. So serialized field, public, let's see, sprite is what we want. And then icon, get private set. And maybe we want a description as well. So field, serialized field, public string, description, get private set. That should be good for right now. You can always come back in here and add extra fields for data that you want to store in a tool type. So let's go back out to the Unity project. In the assets folder, let's right click and create a folder. I'll call this tools, I suppose. Now let's double click into the tools folder, right click, create, gather a top-down RPG tool type. So the first tool type is going to be a axe. So tool type axe. Let's right click, create a new tool type, and then it's going to be pickaxe. So for the display name, I want it to be pickaxe. For the icon, let's search for the pickaxe sprite. We can use either of them, copper, gold, or silver. I'll just do copper for right now. And then we'll say for the description, used for harvesting rocks and ores. Okay, now for the axe, we'll do something similar. I'll just say display name axe. The icon, let's search for axe, and we'll select axe copper. And the description will be set to used for harvesting wood resources from trees. Okay, so now we have these two different types, and we can use these in our scripts in order to check if we are using the right tool type. So first off, on the gatherer, we want to go into the tool game object, and we'll do this in the prefab, but the tool script is going to need to have a tool type associated with it. So what I think would be handy is if we can actually just drag and drop a tool into the tool script. But these are tool types. So we'll have a tool that will have a field for a tool type in case we have different tools of the same type. But we'll set that into the tool script. And actually, I think I want to rename the tool script to something different. So this will be more of a slot to hold the tool. And then we'll have a actual tool as a scriptable object over in our assets tools folder. So let's edit the tool script. And I guess I will change the class name here to be a harvesting component because it's used for harvesting if we are holding a tool. And then we'll need to rename the class name as well. So rename tool to be harvesting as the function we're adding to the player. Okay, so let's make sure we go back to Unity. So let's make sure we go back to Unity. It reloads the domain and we have the harvesting script here. And then let's create a new tool script. So I'm going to right click in the scripts folder of our solution, add a new item, which is of course going to be a C# script, which I will call tool.cs. Let's add that in. Remove the namespace and then make the class a public class. I'll take this part and move it over to the left by selecting it and then shift tab to undo a tab, moving it to the left rather than the right. And now this tool class, the new one, is going to extend Scriptable object. So if we take a look back at the harvesting class, you'll see that we had a min harvest and a max harvest set for each different tool. I think that would be useful to have as a customizable field for the tool class rather than putting it on the harvesting as well. So different tools can harvest at different rates per hit. So let's select these, Control X to cut them, and go back into the tool script, the new one, and paste those in. So in addition to having a min harvest and a max harvest, I think what we are going to want is going to be a display name. So field, serialized field, public string, display name, get private set. And then we'll also have a icon specific to the tool. So field, serialize field, public sprite, icon, get private set. Each tool needs its own description as well. So field, serialize field, public string description, get private set. And then the thing that's a little bit different is we want to reference a different scriptable object inside of this scriptable object. So that's going to be the tool type. So let's do field, serialize field, and then public tool type, I suppose, get private set. Lastly, we need the asset menu. So create asset menu. File name is going to be, of course, tool, and then comma menu name, which is going to be gatherer top-down RPG / tool. And if you want, you can change the min harvest, max harvest. I guess by default, I'll just default those both to 1. And that'll be something that you just customize for yourself for each tool. So let's go back out to the main game menu. Let's right click in the tools folder, and I'm going to create a new tool. So gather top-down RPG tool. And the tool is going to be underscore axe and then underscore copper. The reason I'm doing that is so that if we sort by axe, then all the axes will be listed alphabetically, and then we go to the subcategory of copper, silver, gold. So let's add in the tool axe. So now let's add the details. So this is going to be a copper axe. The icon is, of course, going to be the copper axe. The description can be basic axe for harvesting wood resources. And the tool type, let's select here. We can select from the other tool types we already defined. So we want tool type axe, min harvest 1, max harvest. Let's set that to 2. And now we can duplicate this a couple times. So Control C, Control V. So now with these new types, let's add in silver. And then for the third one, let's add in gold. So for the silver axe, we can say that this is display name silver axe. The icon is axe silver. And this will be a intermediate axe for harvesting wood resources. And let's say max harvest 3. And then we go to gold. Same story. Gold axe. Icon gold axe. And this will be a advanced axe for harvesting wood resources. Still tool type axe. And the max harvest can be 4. So all 3 of these different axe tools are still the axe type. So if we need a axe type in order to harvest a tree, it's going to work with any of these if we assign those to our harvesting component. But let's add in a type of pickaxe as well. So I'll just Control C, Control V, copy the tool axe copper, and let's rename this to be tool pickaxe copper and name it accordingly. So copper pickaxe as the display name, the icon, search for pickaxe, pickaxe copper, and then this will be a basic pickaxe for harvesting stone and ore. And then the type will be pickaxe. The min harvest, max harvest can be 1 and 2. I think that's fine here. Okay, so now we have 4 tools that we can assign to our character. And we have 2 tool types. So for the gatherer tool node, we have that harvesting script. Let's edit that some more. So we removed the min harvest, max harvest, and we need to replace this bit with the tool reference. So at the top field, serialize field, and we're going to have a public tool, and we could call it just tool here if we want, or equipped tool, whatever makes sense to you. Get private set. And when we are using the amount to harvest, we're going to reference the values on this tool that's set in this script. So instead of min harvest, tool.min harvest, and then tool.max harvest. Okay, so that will help us for determining how much resources get harvested, but now we need to check to see if we're using the right type of tool. So for that to actually work, we need to define what the right type of tool is on the harvestable game objects as well. So let's right click on harvestable and do go to definition, and let's set in for the harvestable script what the tool type which can harvest our nodes is allowed to be. So I can add this field up at the top, field colon serialize field public tool type, and this will be harvesting type, get private set. So for the harvesting type check, we can either put it into the harvest function, or we can put it in the harvesting script, or we could put it in both of them if we want to double check to make sure that our tools tool type and the harvesting type set on Harvestable match. So if we want to do it on harvesting script, then we add in an extra condition for the if statement, and that is going to be and harvestable dot harvesting type equals tool dot tool, or what do we call it? Tool dot type. And then that will prevent us from going to the harvest function unless the types match. Alternatively, if you want to check on the harvestable script and make sure that no matter what script going into it, that we only allow the harvest to work if the tool type is correct, we can add an extra field to the harvest function. Or we can make the harvest function private and then have a try harvest function, which would return true if it was successful or false if we had a Boolean. So if you want to do things that way, then let's take harvest and make it private. And then we'll make a public function here, public void try harvest. And we'll have the type going into here be tool type, harvesting type, and then the int amount to try to harvest. So if the harvesting type is equal to harvesting type, the one set in the property up at the top, then we're going to harvest the amount and we'll return true if that's the case. So make sure that your return value is a Boolean. Otherwise, we're going to return false. Okay, so by having this try harvest will basically prevent us from accidentally harvesting a node without having the proper tool type equipped. So let's now go back to the harvesting script and change this to not harvestable.harvest, but harvestable.tryHarvest. And then we'll pass in the tool type from the tool. So tool.type, comma, amount to harvest. And with this being the case, we don't really have to have this check anymore. So I'll just go ahead and remove that actually. And then this should basically achieve the same thing. So the try harvest function essentially checks the tool type to make sure harvesting the node is possible before harvesting the node, and returns true if the node was successfully harvested, or false otherwise. Okay, so now that all that is done, we can go to the harvesting script and we can set what our current equipped tool is. So let's set up tool axe copper. And then let's take a look at the prefabs for the large rock and the tree pine. And let's jump into those. So the large rock resource node needs a harvesting type. So this should be pickaxe. And let's go back out to the scene and look at the tree pine node. So I'm going to expand this resource node. And then let's change the harvesting type to axe. So let's go to the main scene once again. If we look at our player, we can see that the tool set here is the copper axe tool. So this is what's equipped. Let's also apply this to the prefab as the default tool to be equipped. So I'm going to click on the three dots at the top right of harvesting, go to modify to component, apply to gatherer. Now we can hit play and we can test if this works. So let's try harvesting the axe. I'll go up to it, hit F. And you can see that harvesting the rock with the axe does not work. And that's even though the polygon collider is getting churned up. You can look at the scene view, click on the rock, and you can definitely see that the collider is there. So it's successfully preventing us from harvesting the rock. Now, if we go down here to the tree, let's harvest it, and you can see that it is still able to harvest. Okay, and let's try this tree. Okay, I guess got to go down a little bit. Yep, it's working still. And this tree down here as well should work. Now, to prove that this works with other types of tools as well, the scriptable object tools, let's try dragging in the tool pickaxe copper into the gatherer's tool object. So click on gatherer tool in the hierarchy and change the tool to tool pickaxe copper. Now the sprite hasn't changed here currently, but we should be able to harvest the rock. So let's go up here and hit F, and you can see we're harvesting the rock because the harvesting script recognizes us as having the pickaxe tool equipped. So we can keep hitting F, and that's working really well.